When it comes to bullying in children today, there's no better person in your child's school to deal with and address bullies or bullying type situations than a school counselor. My name's Ryan David. My students call me Mr. AV. For over 10 years now, I've been working as a school counselor, grades K through 12. I'm currently at an elementary school. Unfortunately, as a child, I was experienced a little bit of bullying myself, so I have some professional and some personal experience in the area of quite a bit of personal and professional experience in the area of bullying. And I recently put on a workshop for some parents at my school, and I recorded it, and I wanted to share that with you all. So I have that here next. It's about 25 minutes long or so. There is a question and answers at the end, so you'll see that cuts off. You can just watch the workshop portion itself, and or you can watch the question and answers as well. But check it out. Because of the camera angle, my head gets cut off a couple of times there. Goes in and out. I hope you don't mind that so much. But my website is at the end there. My contact information. Feel free to contact me. But stay in tune, follow, keep in touch, and I hope you enjoy. Here it is. I wanted to go over just a little bit of information, a couple of things regarding bullying, what the definition of it, maybe how it can affect the kids, how we can help our own children, how we can recognize it, just a few pointers. So what I have is I have a PowerPoint from the district, and I'll cover some of the slides there with some information. I'll elaborate on that. I have a little bit of information of my own I want to add to that, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody else has, and maybe we can come up with some solutions or cover some things on our own. It's up to you guys how you want to handle that afterwards. But I wanted to at least give you the information that I had or that we have here at the school just to cover that. So how can I help my child prevent bullying? Really, we're talking about recognizing it and how we can deal with it, prevent maybe it from getting worse, or how preventing it from progressing, because we can't really get rid of all the bullying behavior in the world. We can only recognize it and try to deal with it as best we can, and then help our students, help our children who are maybe suffering, but then also help the children who are doing the bullying and address that too. The first and most important thing that I do as a counselor a lot of the times is just to try to establish. You need something, ma'am? You okay?
No, I'm just checking.
Okay. Is try to establish what it is we're talking about and really define what the behavior is. What is it that we're talking about? And nowadays, a lot of times the term bullying is used and thrown around almost anywhere you want. Have a seat, no problem. The term bullying a lot of the times is used synonymously with being mean. And although when somebody's bullying somebody else, it is mean, being mean is just a general behavior. Bullying is more specific. So we want to distinguish exactly what bullying by definition through the school board is, so we can understand, are we addressing a child that's being mean, being inappropriate, or are we addressing a child that's really suffering from bullying in general, or specifically I should say. So what it is here, you see it repeatedly, purposefully hurting someone with less power. You choose a specific target and intend on doing things to that specific target or that specific person to get power over them or hurt them specifically. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit later on, a couple other slides. But here it is again, looking at bullying versus having a conflict. Everybody in here knows that conflicts are just a part of life, and in elementary school, believe it or not, is where they even at an early age start to learn how to resolve and deal with conflicts. Just regular everyday things that come in. That's my seat, no, that's my seat. There's a conflict, we got to get to the bottom of it. They do it, and they do it very well actually, even at this young of an age. So we have to understand, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like the bullying like I just talked about and we'll talk about today? Or are we just talking about a conflict that can be resolved one-on-one or with some help of an adult, and then we can move past that? So distinguishing that difference is a big deal, because conflicts aren't going anywhere, and they're actually good for children to be involved in, because conflict resolution is a skill that they're going to be able to use and apply to the rest of their life, especially as an adult. So these things are very important for their growth and development. Bullying is an extreme case of situation that is specific, like I talked about before. Bullying is everyone's problem. I just put this up there because it radiates, it spreads. If there's a problem with one child in the classroom and it's picking on maybe one or two other children, or one child in specifically, that vibe can affect the culture of the classroom, and then that can spread school-wide. So it does become a problem for everybody involved. Some myths surrounding bullying. Can you see, sir? All right. Try to walk back and forth.
What is that?
Some myths surrounding bullying. Bullying's just a part of being a kid. No. part of being a kid is, falling down, getting up, playing, maybe losing a game. But bullying does not have to be just part of being a child. It can be violent, and it does have lasting effects in a lot of different ways: psychological, emotional. Another myth: being bullied toughens children up. That might be the thought process behind somebody who maybe experienced it as a child and they're tough now, but that's not the case. The fact is, being bullied can cause academic problems, social isolation, mental health problems. So, whereas you might feel like it might toughen them up because they're experiencing something they have to deal with, and hopefully they get some resiliency through it, doesn't always work that way. And a lot of times the lasting effects can be problematic with academics, social isolation, mental health. So it's not just about going through something that toughens them up. Dealing with people that are different, or somebody who's maybe rude or abrasive, maybe dealing with them and interacting with them and tolerating that, maybe that can help them be tougher. But we're talking about bullying. All bullying is physical. Not true at all. It can also be, as it says here, verbal and indirect. It doesn't have to be physical at all. It can be me and my 7 friends will just isolate that one kid and turn away, leave them on the outside, make them feel excluded every day on a regular basis. If someone comes and sits down, we all move away. We haven't touched that child, nothing physical about it, but yet we're making that child feel isolated, or we're making them feel left out. We're name calling, we're spreading rumors, we're gossiping, we're doing whatever we have to do, we're leaving notes, we're doing things that maybe target that one student to hurt them emotionally or mentally without any physical contact. So the stigma, or I should say the typical bully, that a lot of times stereotypical bully that comes to mind is that, I'll beat you up if you don't give me your lunch money. And it's not always that way with bullying, especially nowadays with cyberbullying and things through texting and the internet. There's nothing physical about that, but it can cause and have a lot of lasting pain, like we just talked about. So it doesn't just have to be physical, it can come in other forms too. Some signs of trouble, just for your student or for students in general, that I tend to see or look at or observe. A lot of times they're brought to my attention by the parents. Changes in behavior, avoiding school, drop in the grades, or a change in their grades or their activity at school. If they're missing things come up missing and there's no explanation for it. Headaches and stomach aches, pains, cramps. A lot of times there may be something there from the anxiety or the fear that they have and the tension that they're holding on to themselves. So that'll manifest itself into physical ailments, but sometimes it might even be made up just because they're trying to escape the situation or scenario. So that could come in the form of stomach aches or headaches. But any of these things, and again, these are kind of like the depression commercials on TV. Do you feel tired? Do you get headaches? Oh, you might be depressed. So some of these things could be attributed to many other issues. But if you see a drastic change in their behavior or some drastic changes with your child, you be the best gauge of those things. But these are things just to look for if they jump out. When you get light of these things, or you think that you get a sign or two, you don't want to jump straight to, oh, my kid's being bullied, but you might want to excuse me, consider, is there something going on with someone at school? That's where you might want to just take a look at it. This is my slide I put in there because of doing this for 10 years in the education system and working with K through 12, grades K through 12. I kind of noticed 4 different responses to bullying on students a lot of times when they go through this, or they suffer it, or they're being bullied in one form or another. 4 typical responses that I've come across as a counselor in 10 years, and I summarized them here for you guys. I'll elaborate on them real quickly, and then afterwards, if you want to see me, I have my own personal blog where I really elaborate on this stuff, and you can feel free to read that. It's online. But I wanted to grab this snapshot because not all kids respond the same way to bullying. Sometimes students respond differently, and this may affect your child, or it may just be something to consider. But the first response is one that we typically really encourage. Kids recognize when they're being mistreated, or when someone's targeting them, or when there's a behavior that's unacceptable. They speak out about it, they speak up, and they speak out towards the student right then and there, immediately, and they go and ask for help, and it can be addressed right away. That's optimal. That's what we want first and foremost, is for the child to speak up on their own behalf immediately and to get help. And that would be where we recognize the behavior and we speak up. That's primary. That's number one. That's beautiful. That's great. That's what we would like to happen. But not all students, not all children respond in that fashion. Second one is they recognize the behavior, and before they tell the child that's mistreating them how they feel, they retaliate and they do the same thing back, and then it becomes a back and forth. Now, this may happen after they come home and tell you. It may happen before they even let you know. But the fact of the matter is the child is either mistreated or being bullied, if you will, or something happens with another child and their response is to do the same thing back. Maybe they wait some time and then they retaliate. Like I said, maybe they tell you and then they go back to school and do it. But the retaliation is what happens a lot of the times when the child before or during, when they're experiencing these negative behaviors from another child. And we don't want that. And I'll talk a little bit more about later on what the problem is with retaliating, aside from the obvious ones. Let me turn this off and make sure it doesn't. Sorry about that. The third one is very problematic, especially in terms of bullies. And I say in my blog where I talk about this, this is where another bully is born. Oftentimes, just like with abuse cases, a lot of bullies, generally speaking, a lot of bullies who start to bully other children were once bullied or are currently being bullied by somebody else. It's kind of that domino effect, if you will. And this is the scenario where a lot of times, like I say, a new bully is born. Somebody's mistreated, they're being bullied, or they're experiencing this behavior that is uncomfortable for them. But rather than retaliate towards that individual or to go get help, they internalize it, and it almost unknowingly to them comes out and manifests, and they become almost bully-like towards somebody else in some other fashion. And this is obviously there's a lot more behind the psychology to this level, but this is really what happens a lot of the times where a child who is being bullied can then bully others because of what happened. And I'm not making an excuse, and I'm not telling you it happens like that every single time, but it is a possibility, and I've seen it happen. I saw it happen here recently with one of our students, and that student has made a drastic change and improvement, and it was an amazing thing to see. But it took some discovery on our part and on the child's part, the parents as well, to see, look, there was an outside source, bullying and mistreating this girl for 1.5 years outside of school. This girl came to school, didn't even realize she was really hurt and upset and being mistreated in that way, to the point it was affecting her as much as it was. And she came here and was taking it out on another student. We did a lot of interventions to take care of that, and it's come full circle, and they're doing great. But that was the most recent case. Like I say, I've been 10 years K through 12. That child didn't even recognize or realize the reason why she was behaving that way. It was really mirroring the same way she was mistreated. There's a lot of anger and resentment and rage that gets buried in the back of their mind, and they don't understand why they're mistreating. This girl didn't. So this is a real dangerous one. A lot of the times, if they don't get help or no one recognizes it, they can end up becoming bully-like themselves. And then the last one is very dangerous. The student recognizes that they're being mistreated, they become depressed, they hold it inside, they feel helpless, they feel like it was never going to change, and they could end up hurting themselves. And suicide is where we got to be careful there. This is where they recognize it, but they don't know what they can do about it. Maybe they tell, maybe they look for help, I don't know, but that's a dangerous one as well. So these are just some four responses, some common responses that I've noticed, 4 of the major ones that I've noticed pretty much. And I wanted to mention those because not all children do respond to bully behavior the same way. If your child's being bullied, no news isn't always good news. Meaning if you think everything's going smooth, and even if your child's coming home doing their homework and they tell you how school's great, and you don't get a report or you don't hear about a kid, that doesn't always mean that everything's good. Like I said in the last slide, children are not always they don't always jump to tell you the first thing that happens. They may, like I talked about here, they may be retaliating at school and you don't know about it, or they may be holding it inside and not talking to you about it. So just because they don't run home and tell you this kid's being mean, doesn't mean that they might not have something on their chest, or there might not be something going on. So think about those red flags we talked about earlier and consider those. So you can always ask your child. Don't wait for your child to come to you. You can ask them what's going on in school. Now the key here is, and I'm asking you this as a counselor, we got to be careful that we don't plant seeds. A lot of the times there'll be information that we maybe get from other parents or from the past of another student, and what we want to do is, and I don't have kids, and I'll throw that out there now, but I've seen it and been around a lot of kids, a lot of parents. Over time, what we want to do is, since we want to find out if everything's okay and if there's a problem, we'll go straight to asking, is there a problem with this kid? Is everything okay with this kid? And so the child then starts to focus on those things, rather than just ask, hey, how was your day? Are you getting along with everybody? Is everyone treating you, nicely? Who do you sit with at lunch? And you just leave it open for them to say, oh, I sit with so-and-so. Yeah, everybody in the class is nice to me, except, and then they'll tell you if there is something, rather than plant a seed where maybe there's nothing wrong and you say, is everybody treating you right? Is Brian being nice to you? And they think, well, Brian, I don't really like Brian, and he walked by and bumped into my desk today, so No, Mom, he bumped into my desk today. And then it's like, oh, wow, okay, is Brian, and then we see how it goes from there. A lot of the times that's what happens. So at first, you want to just ask general questions to see what they offer you. And if you get a sense from your kid they're hiding or holding back something more, feel free to come into the school, as I'll talk about in a minute, get another perspective. Maybe dad or the uncle or grandpa, somebody sits down and says, hey, what's up with, you know, the kids, what's going on in there, and see if they open up in a different way. But try to be a little bit open at first and let them give you information rather than give them and plant seeds. So be careful with that, but feel free to ask them questions, open questions about their school, about their day, and let them give you information. 2 common responses to bullying and why they do not work. This is one we say often. Now, just ignore it applies to a lot of things. We do want these kids to ignore a lot. Bullying, not one of them, okay? Someone's tapping, or someone's, you know, singing or humming, or they're, you know, doing something that's minute and that we need to ignore it for them, child needs to ignore it for them to be function at their highest level. Yes, so ignore it is something we often try to teach the kids to do, because we have to do that as adults in life as well. We can't control everything around us. Now, however, bullying is not something we want them to ignore, and I talked about that in an earlier slide. We don't want to just brush that away. We do want to recognize this, ask for help, speak up immediately. So just ignore it, no, not bullying. And fight back, as I said, we don't want to retaliate. Now, defending yourself is a different story, and it becomes, there's a fine line between being stuck in the corner and you can't get free and you're trapped and you fight back to go get help. That's a different scenario. But we're not talking about that. Don't fight back if there is a possibility for you to walk away, get help, or take yourself out of the situation. You don't want to go run in, attack somebody, and be the aggressor. So these 2 things we don't want to encourage. Like I say, there's a scenario, there's an extenuating circumstance where you're in that spot, they need to get free, they need to protect themselves, okay? But we don't want to encourage that fighting back or that retaliating, because then they just become part of that problem, then they're more of a target, more of a reputation. So these things want to be careful of those. What would you do? What do you do if it comes up or you're made aware of it? Obviously take it seriously, consider it, you know, and like I said, that word is thrown around a lot, it's thrown around often, so let's consider the source and consider what the definition is. So, but take it seriously, look into it a little bit, empower your child. I'll talk about that now in a second, and report it. Feel free to, maybe even an email, just stop by and say, hey, I had an interesting conversation with my kid last night about so-and-so. Maybe if you get a chance, keep an eye on them or mention it. I'm going to follow up, but I'm not sure what it's worth. Check it out. Feel free to report it to us. If it's a severe case and you know for a fact there's bullying taking place, you can obviously report it to the authorities. The good news is you can do something about it. You can teach empathy, obviously. You can prepare your children, boost their self-esteem. There's things we can do to prepare our children, and I'll elaborate on that, I think, with the next slide or two, to really empower our children as individuals to be able to deal with whatever it is they're going to face. We want to do that on a regular basis, empower them with the tools to be good citizens, to be obviously good classmates, and to just interact with each other and have good interpersonal skills. And those things can start at home with how we deal with different people who treat and act and respond differently. So we can teach these things and boost them to prepare them as best we can, obviously. Boost your child's self-esteem, emphasize the positive. We do want to focus on the positive. Do you have friends, you know? Maybe you're hearing about this one child that the kid comes home and complains about, or that there's a kid in the class that's messing with other kids, and it's not even on that one kid. Instead of talk about that one kid and what he's doing wrong every single day, well, do you have friends? Well, who'd you hung out with today? Well, focus on the positive and emphasize the positive. You do have some friends in the class. That's who you want to hang around with. You're doing well in school, so don't, you know, get caught up with the other one stuff. So make sure we try to always, and it's tough to do often, but we try to bring it back to focus on, bring it back to focus on the positive things that are going on, because we can get down in a funk when we really feel like the world's against us, or there's a lot of negative things going on. So do focus on the positive, or really emphasize the positive. Encourage your children, obviously, in any shape, way, shape, or form. Empower your child with courage and confidence. This is a big one. A lot of children have things that they're good at, that they love, that they like, riding bikes, swimming, maybe reading or spelling, whatever it is that your child is good at. And has a little sense of confidence, even if your child's reserved or shy, or maybe you know, seen as maybe an easy target, if you will. What you can do is you can look at where they're confident in their life. What are they good at? What do they get excited about? And you focus on that area of their life when they're really excited and they're really confident and they're really upbeat in that moment. You want to channel that confidence and have them use that same confidence when it comes to speaking up for themselves, when it comes to going and getting help, when it comes to telling the student to leave them alone. Use that same confidence, because that's really what we want to tap into. So, you know, empower your kids with those tools. Courage and confidence are very important, especially speaking up for yourself with somebody who's maybe picking on you like you're a little bit weaker than them. Brainstorming solutions, you can do this with your children. Well, what would you do if? How can you handle that? What are your options? Those kind of things. Helpful advice for your child. Obviously, stay calm. You know, don't get over emotional. Be assertive. Again, use that confidence that I just talked about to assert yourself and let them know how you feel about something. Stand up for your rights. Stick together. I threw that one in there because a lot of times kids feel like they're in it on their own. They're by themselves. But they have a classroom full of kids that, with the help of the teacher and a counselor, we can remind them, you go to each other and stick up. There's strength in numbers. So even if you don't have a room full of best friends, you can ask 2 or 3 of the kids, hey, will you walk with me over to the library? So-and-so is going to be in there working, and I kind of don't want to be alone. Go with your friends. So stick together. If you do have friends, more importantly, stay with your friends because then they'll be witnesses. They can, and we've done a couple of exercises and activities in the cafeteria. I go into some classrooms and we do some role playing. And I have one of the kids who feels like they're being bummed out, and I have 3 or 4 friends, and a kid comes up to be mean, and the 4 friends say, "No, leave him alone. Don't do that." And it shows them you got to stick up for each other. So you can encourage your child to stick together with your friends and stick up for each other and get help. Obviously, have them come and get help from an adult. Strategies for managing anger. I'm not sure why this is thrown in there, but in general, it applies to all of us actually. Recognize where the feelings are coming from. Do what you have to do to calm down. Count, and find a healthy emotional outlet. Write it down. Write down how you feel about it. Talk to you, parents, when you get home. If your child is doing the bullying, which there's always a parent somewhere to whoever we're talking about here right now with this quote-unquote bully or the child who's conducting themselves in this way. If for whatever reason you find out from the administration, from the teacher, even from your child, if you witness it and you see it, remember, I think as a parent, it's almost, we take it personal because it seems like it's a reflection on us. If that's how my child is being, what did I do wrong? It's not always like that. There could be something that child went through in their own life at school or interacting with the friends that they perceived in a certain way, and now they're behaving in a way that they need some help understanding. But just be mindful not to become angry or defensive if your child is the one who's responsible for this behavior, because it is something that we can correct through awareness. And don't hesitate to ask for help. Hey, you come to the school, can I speak to the counselor? Listen, this is what happened. We were at a family get-together, and I saw my kid was really kind of pushing and shoving all of his little cousins, and I didn't really like how he was interacting, and I've seen that 2 or 3 times now. What is it that I can do about that, instead of just brush it off or kind of ignore it? So just be mindful of those things as a parent if your child is the one on the other end of it. Get into the root of the problem. Like I said, this behavior could come from different places, many different areas, many different places of their life. But these are just some questions. These are just some questions to ask when it comes to trying to figure out why your child is maybe conducting themselves the way that they are. Is my child getting enough supervision? Are they just free reign? Kids are going to do whatever they can get away with, and so if we won't monitor them, they're going to maybe learn some inappropriate skills or interact in ways that they don't know are right or wrong because no one's there to really teach them. That's mistreating. That's you don't do those things. Do family members bully each other? Kids are like sponges. They'll pick up on whatever they're around, whether that's from family members, TV, classmates. They'll soak it in. So if they're seeing a behavior take place, one family member is bullying the other one, that can become learned, and they can really regurgitate that information and reenact that. So we got to ask yourself: is this anywhere in the family or in that child's close circle to where he could be exposed to this? Is there stress at the home to where this child is feeling something or feeling some type of way about something that they haven't been able to let out or release? Is there a stressor in their life that maybe is responsible for these emotions that they're expressing in a negative way or in an unhealthy way? And is there another source? As I alluded to a little while ago about that student that I worked with, this was a girl who went to dance class. There was a situation with her in dance, and there was a girl in dance that was being mean to her for over 1.5 years. And she never really told anybody about it, never even recognized that was really the source of her pain. Once I sat down and talked to her, she let it all out, and we realized how painful it was. But this source was something that really the teachers were unaware of. Her classmates didn't know anything about it. She really didn't even realize how painful it was. So there may be another source that we're not really aware of that's affecting this child to act the way that they are. You can start to turn things around. These are just obviously things that I think everybody here is already aware of, but we can emphasize. Spend more time together. Model positive social skills. Teach acceptance is the one that I threw on there. Just understanding and teaching your kids there's going to be people in life that aren't the same as you. They don't treat you the way you want to be treated. Maybe they need to learn. They haven't been taught the same principles or values that you have. They have different parents. They still need to learn different things. If we prepare our children to run into these kids, these other students, these other people in life, then they'll be a little bit more understanding and they'll know how to take it, as opposed to being surprised with thinking, this person's not supposed to do this, and freak out. So, but the more we spend time and we model the behavior that we want them to conduct and them to have, the more helpful it is for them on down the road. Positive alternatives, I think this is just for them in general. Encourage healthy interests. Turn strengths into leaders. Turn strengths into leadership. I really try to tell kids they always have an option to, and there's a lot of responsibility with being a leader. I always tell the kids they have an option to have a negative impression on their classmates or other kids, or they can say, look, I'm going to set a good example and have people follow my lead. And oftentimes when I'll get kids that are bullies or that are bullying, I'll tell them, look, you know, you're kind of popular in the class, and you're using your popularity and you're using your strengths in a negative way. You could be a leader in that class and help kids out and do the right things, but instead, you know, you're really intimidating them and scaring them to kind of use it, you know, in the wrong way. So just understand they can, wherever their strong points are, just really encourage those. Create a leader out of them. I try to do this on a regular basis in different forms, different fashions. Get connected to the community, get them involved. The more kids they interact with on a regular basis, the more of a variety they have of interaction. They can understand, wow, that's just an isolated case. You know, Richard maybe is going through a lot, or he just is an exception. Not everybody's mean to me. There are some great kids out there through school. Who can I go to for help? Always let the teacher know so they can understand, you know, how it's maybe affecting the dynamics of the classroom. You can come to myself or any school counselor just to make them aware of it, ask them what you can do, notify the administrator, and maybe in this order as well. You know, first things first, when you get wind of it, ask the teacher, you know, what's going on, inform them of what you know, and say, hey, keep me informed. Come straight to the counselor, and then we'll always inform the administrator, but we can work our way up. And if you find that maybe your child is excessive and really acting inappropriately, and you know, you feel like they're bullying and you really don't know what to do about that, you can always go to a mental health professional, see a counselor professional outside of school, get them some services to try and help correct that. And the same is true for somebody a victim who's been going through something that's been problematic or traumatic or hurtful for them. They can go see a counselor outside of school as well. Because as much as I wish I could help every individual, I'm not a doctor and I only have X amount of time to really try and make sure that their mindset is focused on school and that their well-being is there and they're healthy and they're happy in school. Anything outside of that, anything more extensive than that, that would be a mental health professional outside of school. Obviously, you can contact the police. What else can you do? Support school efforts such as you guys are doing today. Really just raise the awareness and spread this word, the things that we talked about and that you know what the definition is, maybe some strategies, things like that. It really can help do that. And support other school programs, other school care programs. You know, because the more things that kids are involved with, the more they feel a part of something. A lot of the times, there's so much that goes on with bullies or a child that, you know, exhibits this bullying-like behavior. And I heard it, I read it one time, and it was a good way to look at things. You know, there's no such thing as a bully. There's just people who bully, or there's children who bully. Because at the end of the day, that's just another child who is either misled, mistreated, or misunderstands how to interact. You know, that child's not doomed for the rest of their life. That's my job and our job. Our job really, as a society as a whole, to keep our kids safe, but also to help the kids who are making the other ones feel unsafe. You know, so there's a lot of work to be done with the children who are exhibiting bullying-like behavior. You know, it's not once a bully, always a bully. It can become, you know, corrected, and we can fix that. And the more they feel like they're involved and they're a part of something, the better off that they'll be with interacting with each other. Obviously, you can model the behavior you want them to exhibit always. These are some of the resources for the PowerPoint. Like I said, I elaborated my last personal blog really in depth on that one if you want to see me about that. But other than what we discussed today, I wanted to know if there's any questions or concerns or anything that maybe on top of this stuff I can answer, or any information you guys, questions you have that if I can answer it, I'll be glad to do that.
How does the school work with children, let them know about bullying? What kind of activity do you do with children to let them deal with bullying at school?
Are you talking about how we handle a bully that gets brought to me who's...
No, this part I already have been working with you, no? In group as a class, you know, teaching them how to recognize bullying, what to do in this kind of situations, to let them be part of the problem when they have this kind of thing, recognize bullying and work together.
It's a work in progress, and it's about awareness on a regular basis. We try to do a couple of activities we've done now. with the role play and stuff like that. We have the Bully Awareness Week where we really try to, but it's a constant ongoing thing, and it's, you know, for one counselor, I have my co-partner,
Yeah, I
she
know.
works K through 2, I do 3, 4, and 5, but together we try to just intervene anytime we get wind from parents or teachers that there's a situation where some kids may be acting inappropriately. We'll go in and we'll see what we can do, maybe for that whole classroom or for that one student. But the more the better, you know, as far as what the district can allow us to do, provide us with to do, to bring that awareness up. We will take whatever chance we get. One thing I wanted to mention was, just a side note, kind of how it's addressed. When I get a situation where there's a case and there's a child who's bullying another child, first thing, I won't ever pull those two kids down together, at least not initially. You know, because if that child's terrified or traumatized and is upset with that other child, the last thing we want to do is pull those kids together and have them just work it out or talk it out. That child might be traumatized and might not even want to be in the same room. So I wanted to be clear about that. If there is a case where there's even a suspicion or a problem between two students and one of them feels like they're being victimized or they're being, I should say, they're being targeted or bullied, I'll pull that child down first, get an assessment of where they are, and then separately I'll speak to the individual who's, you know, bullying or acting out in a negative way. And after having those conversations, talking to the administration, we'll weigh out the severity of it. And there has been times where the victim or the person who's being bullied said, no, I don't mind talking to them, bring them on down, let's just sit down. But in certain cases, you don't want to do that. So I always kind of am hesitant about that. I want to make sure the students are comfortable and they can work through whatever their reservations are first before they have to face that. You know, it's kind of like, you know, when a rape victim goes to court, they don't want to sit in the same room as someone who has obviously, you know, hurt them or violated them in that way. Same respect I try to treat the students with. But as far as awareness, it's a constant, you know,
Because I think it's important, you know, for
it's
children
absolutely
to
important.
let them recognize when they're in bullying, what to do in this case, you know.
And everything that we just gave you here, in some form or fashion, we've given it to the kids, the parents. I mean, the teachers have given this information to the students and talked about what the definition is, what can you do.
Okay.
And we did it, like I said, with the whole grade inside the cafeteria, and I was on stage, some similar. So this is the adult version of the presentation, a little more sophisticated, but the same concepts. We've worked with the kids, at least 3 through 5 for sure. And then I know Ms. Rodriguez has gone into classrooms in particular and worked with some of the first and second graders. Yeah.
Usually, like, the first step is to have the kid speak up, but what if the kid doesn't want it?
We like to empower him with alternatives. If he doesn't feel comfortable saying, stop that, leave me alone, I don't like it, if that's just not how they feel comfortable, they at least need to know where to go get some help or ask somebody or let somebody know they're doing something I don't like. Because timing is really important. You know, when someone mistreats someone else or misbehaves or does something wrong, right then is when we want to deal with it. We don't want that child who misbehaves or does something wrong or treats somebody poorly to just get away with it, quote unquote, or let time pass where they could, one, they can affect other students in the meantime. You know, they can go from that student and then they're going to misbehave until, so the sooner we know about it from, say, you know, if Jose is mistreated by Billy, the sooner Jose comes and tells us about it, the sooner we can help, you know, Jose out, but also we can address Billy, because if Jose doesn't say anything for 2 weeks, what's Billy doing within those 2 weeks? Is he treating other kids poorly? You know, so the sooner the better. So if he doesn't feel like speaking up right then and there to that child, at least come speak up and know when to walk away and say, look, this just happened and I don't want to talk to him, but this is what it is. So we got to know about it. And a lot of times we won't. We'll find out 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, or a parent will say, well, this has been a problem for 2 weeks, I just haven't said anything. Or this has been a problem for a month, but he hasn't told anybody. I'm sorry, and that's unfortunate, but now that we know, we got to work from here. And I know you guys or whoever it is that comes has been dealing with it for a month, and they're frustrated, and I totally understand, but news to me. So the sooner the better. As soon as we know about it from the child or from you guys, the better. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why we talk about brainstorming options and possibilities and ways to deal with things. What can you do? You know, what can you do if this happens? Are you going to stand up and tell the kid, leave me alone? If you don't feel like doing that, what else can you do? Because you don't just sit there. You have rights. It's your school. It's your rights to say something or to walk away and go get help. That person needs to know they're wrong. You're not wrong. They're wrong. But we got to let that person know. Anything else?
Question, as far as name calling, at what point do you, look at that as bullying? Like my granddaughter had a boy who was saying stuff, and she wasn't real upset about it, or I would have gone right to the teacher. She just said, so-and-so called me that.
Yeah.
And then I said, we talked about it, and she said, well, I am a little chubby.
Right.
So
But
it
that's an
really
interesting
didn't
question.
bother her a lot, but yet, like you're saying, maybe he's doing it to other kids and it might really bother her.
Right.
You know?
And that's an interesting question, because with this presentation and all this talk about bullying, I don't want to belittle being mean. Being mean is not okay either. Just being a mean kid, or mistreating or calling names, that's not okay either. We have a policy with that as well. So there is a fine line between where that kid's coming to school, just to school. I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to go find Sally, and I'm going to call her fat, and I'm going to follow her around, and I'm going to call her names all day long. That's bullying.
Yeah.
But if that kid's coming to school and sitting down, and if Sally walks by, calls Sally fat, if Rachel walks by, calls Rachel fat, if Nigel walks by, calls him fat, like, that's just a kid that's inappropriate, being mean, is breaking rules and mistreating other kids. But we wouldn't consider that bullying,
Right.
because it's not specific, it's not. So that's a fine line, but it's still a problem. That's still a problem. Anybody calls anybody fat, I want to know about it, because I want that child to understand they're hurting people's feelings.
Yeah.
Even if it's not to the severity of bullying, that's a problem.
So even if it doesn't bother, like in the case of my granddaughter, I mean, she talked about it and she didn't think it was that big of a deal, but yet it was enough that she told us. So is that something
You-
we should tell?
You can make the decision, you make the decision on whether you want to work with her at home and say, look, this is how you can handle that. And you can use it as a teachable moment and
Yeah.
say, but if you feel like you need a little more support from the school, come on in, go to the teacher and say, hey, so-and-so called her fat, she seemed all right, we talked about it, but I want to just give you this bit of information in case the kid, decides to step it up, out of
Right,
line
yeah.
again. So the more information, the better, but as far as bullying is concerned, you got to tread lightly on it. Is it specific? Is it habitual? Is it targeted? Is it
Yeah.
only at that child? So that's where that definition comes into play, but it's still a problem. So we still want the children to let us know about it if they're upset about anything. Good question, though. And again, I don't want anything we talk about with bullying to belittle being mean, because name calling is a problem. We can't tape these kids' mouths shut. We wouldn't want to if we could, but you know what I mean by that. They're going to say things and they're going to do things that are inappropriate. We have to teach them, just like we teach them reading and we teach them math. We have to teach them why not to say what they're saying, what it can do to the other kids. And unfortunately, they don't allow me to teach empathy for an hour, or I would do that with these kids. But we still have to use every opportunity we can to let them know how much being mean in general affects others. And if it graduates to bullying, then we have the problem on our hands that we just talked about. But being mean in general, we want to know how to deal with them too. And that's that ignore it type of thing.
Right,
Sometimes
that's
the
the
comments
thing,
or the
yeah.
name calling,
Yeah.
if it's just from across the room, or some kid that's rude in passing, or some kid that maybe we're already working with as a school, is consistently doing these things. Those are the things that, let me ignore. Let me ignore Jose again. He's doing his thing with everybody. Let me
Yeah,
focus
right.
on my friends. Hard to do, but we want to teach him to do
Right,
that.
yeah.
Now, if Jose's just targeting one person, we have a
That's the
problem
time.
that's bigger
Mhm.
than just being mean. Anybody else with anything? Any concerns, questions?
My daughter she's in kindergarten, but she was being kicked under the table in the cafeteria until like December.
By the same student?
They never found out, because I kept on complaining to her teacher.
Did she
But
tell
the
you
kids
who it
were
was?
like,
Did
my
she
little
ever,
girl.
did she ever
Yeah,
tell you
did.
who it was
yeah,
that was
because
kicking
I
her?
saw her bruises.
Did she ever
No,
tell
she
you who
doesn't
it
know
was?
because it was under the table. And
Okay.
we were calling it a game. Let's
Okay.
play a game, and they started kicking each other under
Right.
the table. And she did mention about something about the cafeteria's ladies, that they were being mean also,
Did the
the staff.
staff members in there were being mean? That's a tough one, because those ladies, one, a few of them, if not all of them, they're working for free, volunteering, and two, they have about 200, 300 kids in there at the same time. And a lot of times they're used to dealing with the severity, the problems from the older kids. So if you have something that you're concerned about there, maybe speak to administration, something specific like that. If it's a problem, you feel like they were out of line or something like that, you can always bring that to the attention of the administrators. But I know they do get overwhelmed in there at times. At the end of the day, though, I want your daughter to know that they are going to be the ones that she can go to for help, at least to tell them. And if not, the teacher when the teacher gets there. But something like that game or kicking under the table, something as simple as maybe move away for that, at that time, move down the table. And if they don't let her move, that's a problem. Let the teacher know about it. But if it was one specific kid kicking her under the table, then it'd be more what we're talking about here with the bullying. I would want to know if we need to talk to one kid or just the class in general
Well,
about
yeah, it
this
was from the
game.
beginning of the school year until like December.
The game?
Yeah, and I kept on looking at her bruises, and I'm like, how did you get that? Because
Yeah.
I take care of my kids, I'm like
Of course.
constantly, checking them.
Yeah.
And I just kept on looking at the bruises. How did you get those bruises? Until she told me what happened.
The game, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, things starts as a game. We're playing a game. And we have to go and tell them, this game is done. This game is not a game anymore. We have to remind them, it's not a game if somebody's not having fun or somebody's getting hurt. That's not a
Yeah.
game, guys. So they'll call it a game because games are fun, but this is not a game. So we have to educate them. That's not a game and that's not okay. So let the teacher know, obviously, anytime something like that happens, they need to know it because the teachers aren't in lunch with them. But when they come back, they can definitely make sure seating's okay. We encourage them to not do that.